Analyzing the Jamie-Dakota controversy, media narrative versus real-life relationship. In the modern entertainment landscape, the boundary between fiction and reality is not merely blurred, it is routinely exploited. Audiences are invited not only to consume stories but to extend them, speculate about them, and carry them beyond the screen into the private lives of the people who portray them. This phenomenon becomes especially pronounced when on-screen chemistry is intense, intimate, and commercially successful. In such cases, the narrative often refuses to end when the film does. Few examples illustrate this more clearly than the persistent public fascination with Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson following their work together. Despite the professional nature of their collaboration and the well-documented private lives they maintained outside of it, media narratives repeatedly attempted to transform performance into implication, and chemistry into controversy. This essay dissects that fascination, not to reignite it, but to understand it. By examining how media narratives are constructed, why audiences are drawn to them, and how they often overshadow real-life relationships, we can better appreciate the quiet reality that stands in contrast: Jamie Dornan's enduring, private, and authentic love with Amelia Warner. The power of on-screen chemistry. Cinema has always relied on the illusion of intimacy. From classic Hollywood romances to contemporary blockbusters, the ability of two actors to convince an audience of emotional and physical connection is central to storytelling. When that chemistry is particularly strong, it becomes a talking point, praised by critics, dissected by fans, and leveraged by marketing campaigns. Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson were cast in roles that demanded precisely this intensity. Their characters' relationship was central to the narrative, and the film's commercial success depended in large part on the audience believing in that connection. From a professional standpoint, their effectiveness was evidence of skill, discipline, and trust between colleagues. Yet chemistry, by its very nature, invites projection. Viewers are encouraged to feel, to imagine, to invest emotionally. For some, that investment does not end when the credits roll. Instead, it spills over into assumptions about the actors themselves, as though emotional authenticity on screen must reflect emotional entanglement off-screen. This is the first step where fiction begins to masquerade as reality. How media narratives are manufactured. Media narratives rarely emerge from thin air. They are constructed through repetition, selective framing, and the strategic amplification of ambiguity. A glance during a press interview becomes a moment. A laugh at a premiere becomes evidence. Professional camaraderie is reframed as intimacy. In the case of Jamie and Dakota, interviews promoting their work were often mined for subtext. Playful banter, a common feature of press tours, was isolated from context and presented as something more suggestive. Headlines leaned heavily on implication rather than fact, knowing that curiosity thrives in uncertainty. Crucially, these narratives did not require confirmation to persist. They relied on a familiar template: intense on-screen romance plus visible chemistry equals rumored off-screen tension or attraction. It is a formula the media has used for decades because it reliably captures attention. What gets lost in this process is the distinction between storytelling and life. Audience participation and the demand for continuity. The persistence of the so-called controversy was not driven by media alone. Audiences play an active role in sustaining these narratives. Social media platforms encourage speculation, reward engagement, and blur the line between fandom and authorship. Viewers become co-creators of imagined storylines, extending fictional arcs into real life. This demand for continuity, wanting the story to continue beyond its intended boundaries, reflects a deeper discomfort with endings. When a narrative is emotionally charged, audiences resist letting it conclude. Instead, they search for evidence that it lives on somewhere else. For actors, this creates a paradox. The better they perform, the harder it becomes to separate their professional success from personal assumption. Their work becomes a double-edged sword, praised for its authenticity, then scrutinized for it. The cost of collapsing fiction into reality. When media narratives collapse fiction into reality, the consequences are not abstract. They affect real people, real relationships, and real emotional boundaries. For Jamie Dornan, this meant navigating a period in which his professional work was frequently discussed in the same breath as speculation about his private life. Despite being married and consistently private, his relationship was often treated as secondary to a fictionalized narrative that had more dramatic appeal. This framing subtly devalues real commitment. It suggests that long-term love is less interesting than imagined tension, that stability is less compelling than speculation. In doing so, it reinforces a cultural bias toward drama over durability. The irony is that this bias says nothing about the individuals involved, and everything about the expectations placed upon them. Dakota Johnson and the limits of projection. It is important to note that Dakota Johnson, like Jamie Dornan, was also subject to this narrative machinery. Her professionalism, openness in interviews, and ease during press appearances were often misinterpreted as personal disclosure rather than what they were: aspects of her public persona and working style. The tendency to project romantic narratives onto actors ignores the reality of their craft. Acting requires vulnerability, trust, and emotional availability, qualities that can exist entirely within professional boundaries. To assume otherwise is to misunderstand the nature of performance. By reducing complex individuals to characters in an imagined off-screen drama, media narratives flatten reality into caricature. The quiet reality of Jamie and Amelia. While speculation swirled elsewhere, Jamie Dornan's real life followed a markedly different rhythm. His relationship with Amelia Warner, established long before the peak of global attention, remained defined by privacy, consistency, and mutual respect. Unlike media-manufactured narratives, this relationship did not rely on visibility. It did not require explanation or defense. It existed outside the cycles of speculation precisely because it was not constructed for consumption. Jamie has spoken, over time, about the grounding presence of his family, about the importance of home, and about the value of maintaining a life that is not dictated by public perception. These reflections are not reactive, they are reflective. They reveal a man aware of the distinction between what is performed and what is lived. Amelia, for her part, has maintained her own creative identity while remaining intentionally distant from celebrity culture. This mutual understanding, of privacy as protection rather than secrecy, forms the foundation of their enduring bond. Why quiet love is often overlooked. The media's difficulty in accepting Jamie and Amelia's reality is not accidental. Quiet love does not generate clicks. It does not lend itself to speculation or cliffhangers. It lacks the volatility that drives engagement. As a result, it is often overshadowed by louder, less substantiated narratives. This imbalance creates a distorted perception of reality, where fictional tension appears more real than documented commitment. Yet longevity tells its own story. While media narratives rise and fall with each news cycle, real relationships unfold over years. They absorb change, weather pressure, and adapt to life's demands without needing to be constantly reinterpreted. The endurance of reality over narrative. Time is the most effective critic of fiction. Speculative narratives rely on momentum. When they fail to materialize, they must be replaced by new ones. Reality, by contrast, does not require reinvention. As years passed, the imagined controversy surrounding Jamie and Dakota faded, not because it was resolved, but because it was never real to begin with. What remained was professional respect and a completed body of work. Meanwhile, Jamie's real life continued uninterrupted. His marriage endured, his family grew, his career evolved. None of these developments aligned with the dramatic arcs once projected onto him. In this way, reality quietly outlasted fiction. What this reveals about celebrity culture. The Jamie-Dakota narrative is less about two individuals than it is about the culture that consumed it. It reveals a collective tendency to prioritize imagined drama over observable truth, to blur professional collaboration with personal implication, and to undervalue privacy in favor of access. It also highlights the emotional labor expected of public figures, particularly actors, who are asked not only to perform convincingly, but to manage the aftermath of that performance in their personal lives. This expectation is neither fair nor inevitable. It is a byproduct of media ecosystems that reward speculation over substance. Reclaiming the boundary between role and reality. At its core, this analysis calls for a reclamation of boundaries. Actors are not their characters. Chemistry is not confession. Performance is not proof. Recognizing this does not diminish the power of storytelling, it protects it. When we allow fiction to remain fiction, we preserve its magic without demanding that real lives bear its weight. Jamie Dornan's enduring relationship with Amelia Warner stands as an example of what is possible when that boundary is respected. A life lived with intention, insulated from narrative excess, and rooted in authenticity rather than perception. Conclusion. When the story ends where it should. The so-called Jamie-Dakota controversy was never a story about truth. It was a story about projection, appetite, and the refusal to let fiction end where it belongs. By contrasting that narrative with the quiet, consistent reality of Jamie Dornan's life with Amelia Warner, a clearer picture emerges. One that challenges our assumptions about love, fame, and authenticity. On-screen chemistry can be compelling. Media narratives can be seductive. But neither holds a candle to the power of a real relationship that does not need to be seen to be sustained. In the end, the most meaningful stories are not the ones endlessly rewritten by speculation, but the ones lived steadily, privately, and without applause. And that is where reality, once again, surpasses fiction.